The loudest love is the one you never hear. He bought the seat next to her on every flight for 3 years. 217 flights, 41 countries. Not a single word. She thought he was a stalker. She was wrong. The first time Clara noticed him, she was exhausted. A red eye from Singapore to Frankfurt. She was buried in a risk mitigation deck. The man in the adjacent seat ordered nothing, spoke to no one, read a biography of Nikola Tesla for 7 straight hours. She remembers thinking, quiet neighbor, thank God. By the 3rd month, she stopped thanking God. It wasn't just one flight, it was every flight. London to Dubai, Tokyo to Sydney, Sao Paulo to Zurich. Always the same man. Always the seat beside hers. He was tall, silver-templed, suits that cost more than her car. He never introduced himself, never nodded, never breathed in her direction. 12 different flights, she told herself. That's when I started counting. She ran the numbers. 36 months, not a single cancellation. If she booked an emergency repositioning at 2 in the morning, he was there. If she swapped her ticket to a different carrier, he was there. His name was Elias Thorne, reclusive investor, net worth north of $30 billion, known for nothing except his invisibility. 3 years, she thought, not one word. I counted that too. At first, she tried to ignore him. That lasted 6 months. Then curiosity became a splinter under her skin. She tested him, spilled coffee toward his sleeve. He lifted his arm without looking and avoided the spill. No reaction. She left her passport behind and pretended to deplane. He stayed seated. The passport was exactly where she'd left it. She tried conversation. Long flight, huh? Silence. Do I know you from somewhere? Nothing. Once, after severe turbulence, she turned and said, "That was rough." He blinked. Then he turned back to the window. The silence wasn't shy. It was deliberate. A man doesn't spend millions on flight tickets for 3 years because he's indifferent. Clara stopped being annoyed. She became consumed. Spreadsheets, flight numbers, his subtle tells, the way he angled his body away, how he never ordered food until after she'd eaten, the briefcase he never opened. She noticed that he flinched whenever she laughed too hard at a movie. Not annoyance, something closer to relief. The answer came on a flight to Reykjavik, not from him, from her own buried memory. 10 years earlier, Clara was 24, volunteering as a translator on a medical transport plane from a disaster zone. The plane carried a dozen patients. One of them had been pulled from a collapsed building. His heart stopped twice. The medics were overwhelmed. Clara followed the CPR instructions barked over a crackling satellite phone. She pumped his chest for 23 minutes until he gasped back. She never saw his face clearly. Blood and dust. She filled out a form. Patient X. Then she went home and forgot. On the Reykjavik flight, Elias Thorne turned his head slightly. For the first time, his eyes met hers. Not a glance, a recognition. Deep, ancient, unbearably tender. Then he looked away. 2 hours later, Clara found the truth. The medical transport had been funded by a shell company. The shell company traced to a family trust. The trust's beneficiary was a man declared dead after that collapse, who later reemerged as one of the most powerful silent investors in the world. Elias Thorne. He wasn't following her. He was watching over her. For a decade. behind the scenes, he bought the firm that employed her, crushed 2 competitors who tried to blacklist her, paid off her mother's medical bills through a fake lottery. And for 3 years, he'd sat beside her in silence because he believed that speaking would taint the debt, that his presence should be a gift, not a burden. It broke open over the Atlantic. Flight 741, New York to London. The cabin lost pressure. Oxygen masks dropped. Screams. The pilot's voice, too calm. We are descending to 10,000 feet. Remain seated. Clara's hands fumbled for her mask. Then Elias's hand closed over hers. His fingers were warm, steady. He held her wrist until the plane leveled out, then released it. Still no words, but his eyes said everything. When the captain announced they'd be diverting to Boston, Clara turned to him. You saved my life 10 years ago, in that building. Elias Thorne reached into his briefcase, the one he never opened, and withdrew a single sheet of paper. A deed to a company she'd never heard of. Valuation, $47 billion. His voice was rusted from disuse, soft as a shovel hitting soil. I don't need you to speak. I needed you to know that someone saw, someone remembered, someone spent every day trying to be worthy of what you did. He deplaned in Boston. A black car swallowed him. She never saw him again. The company was a shell. Inside it was a global clean water initiative he'd built in her name. She signed the deed with a pen stolen from a hotel in Singapore. Clara never saw Elias Thorne again. But on every flight she took for the rest of her life, she left the seat beside her empty, just in case. And in that small, wordless gesture, she finally spoke back. That's not a love story. Not really. What Elias gave Clara was the kind of love that asks for nothing, that watches from a distance, that sits in silence for 3 years because speaking might disturb the peace of the person it cherishes. Most people think love is loud, but the deepest love is often invisible. It pays your mother's medical bills through a fake lottery. It crushes your enemies before you know you have any. It buys the seat next to you on 217 flights and never says a word. Because real love doesn't need to be seen. It just needs to work. So here's the question. Has someone ever loved you in a way you didn't notice? The quiet kind. The kind that sat beside you for years while you were looking everywhere else. And if they did, would you even know?